Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see, today I have a guest, Jason T. Smith. And as always, I love to start with finding out, Jason, how has your week been?
Wow, you're the first person to ask me that this week, Danette. So thank you. How thoughtful. It's already a busy week. I'm actually doing lots of podcasts. I was chairing a health forum yesterday. I'm proofing a few other manuscripts. Like, it's been busy. So, but who wants to be bored? I definitely do not have nothing to do.
That is awesome. And well,
How's your week, Danette?
my week's been awesome. Busy like yours. I've got a book, second book I'm writing, so did that over the weekend, and lots of workshops this week. So and a bit of travel, which will be awesome. But it's like spring here, so I'm absolutely happy. In my happy place. So let's start, Jason. I'd love for you to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about your fascinating journey.
Yeah, and it's always interesting talking about your own story, because of course everybody has a story. I'm not unique. It just happens to be the only story I've got to tell. And it's hard to know where to pick up my crazy adventures and experiences. But I often start by saying to people, I am a very accidental businessman. I am a reluctant franchisor. I am a failed medical missionary. I am a passionate physiotherapist, but a very unlikely entrepreneur. And so that purposefully creates mystery and curiosity and ambiguity in my story, but not because I'm trying to be clever, but because that's actually how it really is.
I
And
love
so,
that.
yeah, at 24 years of age, I had my midlife crisis, if I can say it that way, like my quarter life crisis. I was an early bloomer. And most people know midlife crisis, the cliche, you get a slick haircut, you dress in skinny jeans, you go buy a red sports car, or in my case, a Harley Davidson. But I didn't wait till my 40s. I was 24. I was a graduate physiotherapist. I thought my whole life would be about working in the developing world. My wife was from Brazil. She'd seen abject poverty. She was an intensive care nurse. We thought we were the perfect package, really, to be able to go and support, third world missionary medical projects. And it just never turned out that way. I got stuck in suburbia, running a hobby business out of the garage at home. And that's kind of where my story goes, on a very different arc to what I ever expected.
Oh, I love that. And we'll talk more about that arc as we go. You've got the book Unlikely coming out, or is it out already? I didn't actually check.
I have a copy. You don't, but I have a copy.
I love that.
This is the test copy that I'm just doing the final proofs and markups on, but it's due to be released on the 1st of October.
Excellent. So I'm really curious, what got you thinking about writing this particular book?
Yeah. So I've written a few books previously, but they had very distinct purposes for very specific audiences. Actually, I didn't set out to write this book. This is a bit of an accident too, so that you can see a bit of a theme emerging in my life, Danette. I don't do anything I do well. Seems to be unintentional, and the things I try, I don't do so well at. But we actually, if I fast track to the kind of origins of this book, it's because after 25 years of running a business that became Australia's, if not the Southern Hemisphere's largest physiotherapy network, we ended up selling it. And that might be a story we go back to in a minute. But the day after, literally the day after we sold the business, which was just in the tail end of COVID, my wife said to me, our kids were either not even born or at least very young when we went through all the difficulties, all the challenges, the hardships of starting and growing this business, and they will never know what we went through unless you tell them. So she suggested to me just to jot down a few memories. And over 3 years of journaling and putting together some anecdotes and distilling lessons that I learned from our time in a startup business, it dawned on me, this is probably something bigger than just a little reflection piece for my kids. And maybe if I sanitize it, there's a wider audience. And so that's kind of where the book has now emerged from. All of the ramblings of a madman who wanted to give his kids a really authentic picture of what mum and dad went through before they had an age of understanding, so that we can pay it forward to our generation. And now we have a book for others with, a slightly modified version of what our kids have got to read, but it's nonetheless, I think, still a very honest account.
I love that. And what a beautiful gift for your children.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because when they're young, they don't really appreciate. We've got so this is second gen business that my husband and I started, and we've got a couple of our children work in the business.
Wow.
And I just love that idea of being able to share those, things that happened when they were really young. That's beautiful.
I think what an honor, hey, to have your kids working with you.
So blessed.
One of our middle boys, we have 3 boys, but one of our middle boys always said, once he got to that cute age of starting to project what he wants to be when he grows up, he says, Dad, I want to run your business. I want to become a physio and I want to run your business. And it really moved me to the point where I believe that narrative too. So you could imagine when we did sell, and he was only a young teen at the time, the rest of the family were partying at the notion that this whole event had happened. They were celebrating, but my one child kind of felt for a moment, well, what am I going to do now? You've got rid of the business. Because the notion of working with your kids is beautiful. In our case, not to be.
Yeah. Well, yet. Who knows?
Yeah, true. I'll support him in his business.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing to have such a wonderful mentor as well. So tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit more about your business and that journey that you went through from garage through to sale.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, the subtitle of the book is The Surprising Personal Story Behind the Garage Startup That Became a $100 million national health brand. So I think in all businesses, in all brands, in all organizations, there is, there's a start, there's a birthing, there's the bootstrapping season where you all do it tough. Then there's what I call the ugly years, which is like adolescence, in the human cycle of growth, where the business looks a bit pimply and hormonal. It's definitely stronger than it once was, but it's got some behavioral issues. And then you get to what you hope to eventually arrive at, which is some level of interdependence and maturity, and this business is now paying its own way and washing its face. And so I kind of tell that story of the business journey that most brands have to go through. But instead of just giving the commercial markers and benchmarks and tidbits, of which some are in there for sure, it's very much the personal journey. So what did I wrestle with? What hurt? What I celebrated? What fulfilled me? What was going on at home in the family? What was going on in my mind and heart as I kind of wrestled? Am I a leader? Can I actually endure this? I became a physiotherapist because I loved healthcare. At some stage, you realize you're less of a practitioner and a clinician, and now you're more of a manager and an owner. What does all those transitions look like? So the book is full of that, and it really is. And I'm a bit nervous about this, to be honest. It's a warts and all story. Nice. And so unless you really were in my inner circle, I think people are going to be surprised, maybe shocked. Certainly it's an eye-opener, because we present an image, we have a facade, we wear masks, we try and we tell ourselves this is being responsible, this is what my role demands of me. It's to build confidence in the team around me. some of which I think is true.
Yeah.
But in the book, I have no reason not to just tell you how it was, because that chapter is finished. You can share in the tears and the joys, and I hope for a lot of people, they read their own story in it.
I love that. And how refreshing, because often we do get that sanitized version. And it's really important for people to actually know there's a human that
Yeah.
and humans involved in this process, and we're all different.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
So now I'm curious. Tell us a little bit, Jason, about your other books.
I do have a few other books. I have contributed some chapters to some technical CEO books years ago, but the only other two that I have authored, one is Get Yourself Back in Motion. And this was commissioned by the publisher for expert physio advice, but to the lay person. So it's almost like taking a physio home. And Lydia Lassila, who is our triple Olympian in aerial skiing, she actually endorses this book, and she says she loves it because it's like a pocket physio. So I really just teach people how to live longer, live better in that book.
Nice.
And then I have one other book, Outside In, Downside Up Leadership. And this accounts for the 3 most difficult years in my life as a CEO. So unlikely, the memoir that's just about to come out is really the whole story from start to finish. This one is just the 3 horror years, actually, right in the middle, where I sought to double our business in 3 years that had previously taken me 12 years to achieve. And so you could imagine it's full of blood and guts. There's a lot of blood sport in that book.
Yeah.
The subtitle being 50 Insights from a True Story of Remarkable Organizational Change. And so there's 2 books I've written.
Nice.
But, you know, there's probably a targeted audience for those. They sit in very distinct genres. I think Unlikely probably caters to the everyday person. It transcends business. It's really a biography.
Nice, nice. And your second one that you were just talking about, given it was the 3 horror years, I'm really curious, what did you learn through that stage?
Well, so the quick backstory to that is this little garage startup business over 12 years. So there is no such thing as an overnight success.
No, there is not.
But it had reached about a $25 million revenue. I had about 40 locations around Australia, which might sound substantive. And in our industry, which is a very cottage allied health sector, it was certainly the biggest already at that time. But when you compare it to corporate Australia, right, this is still just a very small undertaking, and we were working really hard, and I relied on the handful of executives that sat around me, and it was do or die every day. Like, it's funny, actually, one of the guys who endorses this book is a very, very successful entrepreneur, Craig Winkler, who started MyOb and then went on to invest heavily into Xero, the accounting platforms. And I love what he writes, just very quickly to kind of endorse this book. He says, discover the chest tightening reality of risking everything. And they're his words, but it really sums up where I was just on the threshold of this 3 years of what became the hardest 3 of the journey.
Yep.
And I had sort of given myself, well, it was self-appointed long service leave. I took 3 months off. I needed a break. We went overseas. We took the kids to South America. It was wonderful. But entrepreneurs get very dangerous when they step away from their business because their minds tick over. They start dreaming. They imagine a better future. They get very ambitious. And so when I returned, I was really compelled around being more aggressive with our brand. And to the horror of the team around me, I set this unreasonable mandate to double our business, to go from, in fact, 25 million to 50 million, to go from 40 locations to 100 locations, and to do it all in 3 years. Little did I know I was lighting the match that would set off the bomb that would blow up everything I had built up until that point. And so I call it the phrase I've coined is I incited a leadership revolution.
Nice.
And not because I'm clever, but because I'm naive, because I underestimated how much this would pull on us in all different directions. Within 6 months, I actually released from employment every one of my national support team. So that was 20 people. And then I invited them to reapply for a job. And, it's a little bit of gameplay, right? But in the psychology of it, I didn't want them to think tomorrow was going to be just another day at work.
Yes.
I needed them to recognize we were going to do things differently. The culture was going to step change. Whatever I used to do or used to be or what you thought I was, I'm now actually signposting to everybody. Tomorrow is a new day with a new set of goals and objectives. And so 18 of those 20 reapplied for their job and were successful, but on new terms, new expectations.
Nice.
I released 2 to a new adventure. And we set about reinventing ourselves. And I'm saying almost every aspect of life in our office, the way we talk, the way we thought, we pulled down partition walls, literally. We got rid of all the offices. We went collaborative style. We went peer accountability. My role as owner or boss became redundant. I was one of the team. We are in the trench together. It's a contest of ideas.
Nice.
And we went hard on ourselves. But to pretend that was all romantically beautiful would, of course, misrepresent it. It was hard, really hard. And I lost more people as we kind of sorted the wheat from the chaff. And it's not good and bad people.
Yeah.
It's just people who are prepared to live the new regime.
Yes.
But you know what? At the end, we exceeded our target.
That's so awesome.
That's a credit to the people who were brave and went for it. And so that's kind of the story of that second book.
I love
Outside In, Downside Up. And I use that title, Outside In, Downside Up, because it felt like we went into a washing machine. And of course, the cliche is inside out or, upside down. But I'm saying this was even more disorientating than that. So that's kind of the axiom that we started to brand our hearts with during that period.
Yep. Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I watched a video yesterday by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who has a book called Your Future Self, and he's writing a new book about disrupting, and he was talking about impossible goals, and it so resonates with what you just shared. So I'm going to get a copy of that other book of yours and have a good read too.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people are like, oh, I've read that book. Why do I want to read this one? And I'm like, that's a good question. This book is 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
In this one. Like I literally just say, hey, this was the period, the ugly period, the 3 years of going to hell and back. And I don't have the heart to repeat it all.
Yes.
It's too painful. If you want to hear the detail, there it is.
Go there. I love it.
And you want to disrupt yourself.
Yes.
I mean, we're gonna be disrupted. That is a given. So I don't know this author you've just mentioned, Hardy, but that sounds a really fascinating book. But he's right. I believe what he says.
Yeah.
We are going to get disrupted. The question is who's going to do it. And I think if you self-disrupt, you ignite the passion for innovation before you need it. You reset your trajectory and you leapfrog those inevitable dips otherwise in the momentum of your own story.
I love that. Oh, we've got a number of younger generations in our business, and I know there's lots of people out there who are keen to start their own businesses. And given your experience going from garage through to actual sale, I'm curious, what sort of advice would you give them as they're thinking about starting a new business or starting a business?
Yeah. Look, I do a lot of mentoring of both emerging business owners and seasoned executive teams and very large brands. It's funny, whenever somebody starts the conversation with a question, what would your advice be? I feel overwhelmed with mixed emotions. Genuinely.
Tell me more.
Yeah. And I think people hope for me to just say all the great reasons why you should do it. but I feel a tension to be candid with people,
Yep.
because for me the most important that I'd like your listeners to hear is eyes wide open. Eyes wide open. Just like you wouldn't want to go into a marriage on a fling of an emotion. You would want to make a calculated, determined commitment. Like, this is well considered. This is, without sounding too transactional, you want to have done your due diligence, right, before you commit to a lifetime till death do us part. In a similar vein, I think, starting a business is amazing. It is exciting. You are giving birth to something new. You are creating. This is a privilege. It is an honor, but eyes wide open, because it's easy to start a business. It's really hard to grow a business. It's actually more rare to succeed in divesting a business. And so, all these aspirations, I think, need to be bridled into some reality. So if I was talking to a young person, or anyone really looking to start a business, because I coach some 60 and 70-year-olds, can you believe it, who are actually still looking at new initiatives, and it's amazing. It's inspiring. It's this idea of eyes wide open. And I would suggest three things, amongst 100 of others. These would be the three that I'd really kind of want to start with. Number one is why. Very obvious, I know. Lots been written on this, but still, it's inescapable. Unless you have a compelling why, like you need a purpose, a reason, it's going to get tested every day. So let's get it worked out at the front end, because I'd like to road test. I'd like to pressure test your why before you put your house on the line. So why. The second thing would be, decide now what lines you're not going to cross. Because in our enthusiasm, in our creativity, in our intention on disrupting a market and being risk averse and entrepreneurial, we have to push the envelope. We have to transcend some conventional boundaries. But the question is, what lines would you not cross? Let's decide before we get there, so that we recognize the danger signals before it's too late, because there's no coming back from some of that stuff. And in the marketplace, it's unforgiving. Trust is very, very fragile. And then the third thing I would say is, decide what the end looks like, so that you don't keep making sacrifices in the law of diminishing returns beyond what you actually sought out to achieve, because we can get sucked into the game and we can lose our family, we can lose ourself, we can lose our health. Three things that are very important to me. And sometimes it's the mirage of more. And actually, we've already gone past what we thought we were going to do this for. So why don't we just now enjoy and be fulfilled and content? So that would be the three things I would say to someone starting a new business.
Great answer. I love that. So I'm curious, obviously during business, there are challenges and there are times when we fail. Would you mind sharing a lesson or two that you've learnt from that?
Yeah. Sadly, and very unpopularly, I think the journey of most businesses is this experience of hardship, difficulty, personal crucible moments, scattered with some highlight successes and wins, but really 9 to 5, or in business, 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. is more characterized by oscillating between those 2 points in rapid fire. It's like this, you feel like a pinball in the arcade machine. So I feel like I've failed more than I've got it right. I feel like I have definitely fallen forwards into a lot of my unlikely successes, hence the title of the book. And so I got more than we have time to choose from. But, I'll just give you some examples. I mean, one of the really big, it's always people, really, Danette. It's always
totally.
people. Yeah. And I am very task driven. I am very linear. Like I'm a physiotherapist. I went to medical school. It's anatomy, it's physiology, it's science, not a lot of creativity, not a lot of EQ. It's taken me a long time to practice that. It didn't come naturally. And so when I started business and started employing people and building teams, I was very pragmatic. And actually it took me a long time, after broken relationships, after I would hurt people, offend people, displace people, not intentionally. Task-driven people don't do this for fun. They just see the world through a different lens. And my wife has been an amazing coach to help unpack or release this capacity to recognize there's people on the end of all these conversations and emails. And so what I learned in that, and it was a hard lesson to learn, but it's very simple, really, is that people matter.
Yeah.
People matter. People matter more than anything else, more than the brand, more than the bottom line, more than next month's set of goals and objectives. People matter. People matter because without people, why do we even do this?
Yeah.
And I know I'm sounding very, very cliche, but actually, I reckon half the world don't get it as easily as the other half.
Yeah.
And we cerebrally acknowledge it, but experientially, we don't let it change the way we behave. And so I reckon the first half of my 25 years in business, I pushed against it. And I think in the second half, I started to lean into it. And so people are both my greatest joy and my greatest regret, because, depending on whether I was living congruent with that learning, I won or lost.
Yes.
And, by making people and relationships the prize, the hero of your day, doesn't mean you don't get hurt. Doesn't mean they won't betray you. Doesn't mean they agree with everything you say. Like, it doesn't make life easy all of a sudden, but it does make it meaningful. And I think that would be what I've learned from most of my hardships. And, for those who get into the depth of the book, I talk about lots of legal entanglements, unfortunately, lots of court appearances where people have litigated. In all my time, I only issued one court proceeding at the Supreme Court, and that was with somebody who, after 4 years, would not concede to the most basic of obligations, and it was causing distress to a myriad of other peoples. And so it was really a last-ditch sort of effort. But I'm actually not even condoning or excusing it. I'm just saying these were hardships. These were my realities. And in all the midst of that complexity, I still had to wrestle. But, there's people involved. It's not just money and brands and legal rights and obligations. It's people. And I'm not saying I did great at that. I'm saying I had to learn that.
Nice. What a great answer. Thank you for that answer. So I'm really curious about, what are you most grateful for?
Wow. Such a beautiful posture, isn't it? To just start and finish your day with gratitude. So much has been written and researched on this. And ultimately, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to God every day for the people, because we've just spent a few minutes talking about this. It's actually the people, firstly. So my wife, who has been long-suffering through all of this. I mean, she's a massive contributor to our story in all the obvious ways, but also in ways nobody ever sees, that she never gets the credit for. And so super grateful for that. I'm really grateful for mentors. And I write about this in the book because I feel really, I don't know if I'm unique, but I feel privileged nonetheless, that I've had 4 mentors over the course of my life, from the age of 15 still to this day. Not the same person the whole time, but it's almost like a relay race or a passing of the baton. But I've never been without somebody I could go to just be a running mate, to be, maybe a father figure, maybe a peer, but maybe an older brother type. But I've never been without someone to journey life with, not always specifically business, but I'm really grateful for those people, because I wonder often, where would I be when I got to those big intersections? I didn't know whether to go left or right or keep plowing ahead. And it's those moments of debriefing with people who I know have my best interests at heart. They've been a few chapters ahead in their own story. So I put a huge value on mentorship. And that comes in different shapes and sizes, and we use different words. So I'm just being general, not too prescriptive, but I'm really grateful about that. And you know what? I'm grateful for my health. As a physio, I've made a career out of working with individuals who are not healthy. They're sick, they're injured, they're limited. And I think, 50 years ago, we measured wealth in terms of our bank account. I reckon 20 years ago, we measured wealth in terms of discretionary time. Like, I just want to live longer. I want to have flexibility. I want to be able to choose what I do. Like there's choices creates a sense of wealth. I think today, as it stands, we should be measuring our wealth in terms of our health, because science is giving us longevity. We live longer, but we're not living better. We're actually deteriorating. It's traversing curves. What's the use of having money and having time if you don't have physical, mental, spiritual health? And I'm a health practitioner, so I think the most wealthy amongst us are the healthy, in that holistic sense. And so I'm grateful that I'm healthy, and I don't take that for granted.
Love that. My coach used to say, "You don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard."
Yeah, exactly.
Really good saying.
I haven't heard that. It's great.
It is good. So I'm really curious, what are you up to now?
Well, I sold the business 3 years ago. We listed it through a backdoor pathway onto the ASX. I spent a year consulting to that new parent entity that managed our business and a few other acquisitions that we cobbled together. And took about a year anyway, just to say my long goodbyes and transition the operations of the business. So for the 2 years since then, other than writing this lengthy book, I have we run our own charitable foundation. So that's very important to my wife and I. So we're investing into some really meaningful projects in the subcontinent of India and around Southeast Asia. And in Australia, there's a lot of Indigenous communities we've been invested into for over a decade. So that's pretty time consuming. I chair a few boards, and including Halftime Australia, which is all around mentoring business owners as they're transitioning from the peak of their performing years into a life of paying it forward, giving back, being significant to those around them. And I think that's really rewarding work. And people did that for me. So this is now I'm in a place where I can return that favor. That lived experience moves on. And I'm doing a little bit of speaking and just sort of freelancing on the side, some investment projects. So, it's a diverse mix now. It's a very different life to what I was doing for 25 years. I kind of describe it, that was kind of one big assignment. It consumed 100% of my waking time. Now I've probably got 10 little assignments, all of which are fulfilling, but it's a very different way of life.
So the other thing I'm curious about, I've noticed on your website that you talk a lot about convictions, and I'd really like to understand that more.
Fortunately, they're not legal convictions. That would be troubling. That would be troubling.
It would be.
I do use the word convictions a lot because a long time ago, I tried to distill in the vocabulary of the pop culture, what do we mean when we say certain things? And there's a lot written in the success literature and about values, core beliefs and identity. And, these are all important parts of our personal growth. And I subscribe to all that. But I felt like for me, I needed a word that better articulated some nuance on all that. And I've landed on this word conviction because I think actually it's the one that was always meant to describe what I'm trying to message. So conviction for me is more than just having a great idea. It's more than being visionary. You know, a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs, they can see into the future and around corners and imagine this innovation, and it fuels them and it gathers people around them. And I think that's amazing. But that'll only get you so far. I think conviction is like a supercharger on all that. Conviction is more than what you could do. It's what you must do.
Oh, I love that.
Conviction is this transformative truth of not only what you can do, but who you are. I think it strikes at the notion of what we were born to be, not just born to do. And so this is like foundational. So when you say to me, Jace, what are your values? I can give you some. But if you ask me, what are my convictions? I feel like that's actually a layer deeper again. And so I want to lead out of my convictions. My values can morph and shapeshift over time, depending on the project and, you know, as I learn and grow. But I feel like convictions are almost, they are right at the core. It's the defining identity. And so I'm very respectful of that word, and I reserve it for only intentional uses, because I want people to understand, if you can live and you can lead out of conviction, almost nothing will stop you. You will literally die trying, because this is who you are. It's not just what you could do. And I think, you know, at the core of a business, even, just to be very commercial here for a minute, if you know your convictions, it makes you unstoppable. It really does. So let's be really careful what we build convictions around, because I think they're that important.
I love that. Oh, and even your use of the word must.
Yeah.
There's no like plan B, no nothing.
Yeah, that's it. Like you're compelled to do this.
Yes.
I don't even like some of my convictions. I wish they were yours, Danette. But I can't deny them.
Yes.
Like it's true, even if it's not convenient.
Yes.
And so I am compelled. I must follow through. Like I've had situations in business where I've literally written, like I'm thinking of one instance I write about this, where I wrote a check for $80,000, which is not an insignificant sum, right? I wrote a check of $80,000 and gave it back to someone who didn't deserve it, who legally I was entitled to keep, who frankly, at a time where I needed the money, but I felt compelled. My conviction said, if people matter, this is the right thing to do, even though you're entitled to it. It is something I almost felt no choice around because of the God I serve, the faith I believe in, the values I subscribe to. They pile in on this conviction that says, even though I don't want to, I must.
What a great.
And you never live to regret those moments. They hurt, they're painful, they have sacrifice, they have consequences in the moments, but you never live to regret them.
Yeah. Yep. Whereas I would imagine if you hadn't have written that check and handed it back, you would have had a regret.
I think so. And I have those too, right? Yes. I have those moments.
You're human.
Unfortunately, where I wish I'd done it differently.
Yep.
And I denied my conviction. I buried it. I kind of pretended it didn't exist, but it chases you.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, you can't outrun your convictions.
Yep. And honouring them also then means you get to sleep well at night.
Well, you get to live, I think, who God created you to be.
Yeah.
I think you actually step into the fullness of your calling. You step into the fullness of your identity, and therefore the potential is realised.
Yes.
And that is rewarding, right? Like that's fulfilling at a level that no bank account, no award, no media article could ever acknowledge.
Oh, yes, love that. Now we're coming towards the end, so I'm really curious. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, look, I mean, if people want to track me down, I think,
Love that.
yeah, that they're very welcome to. I find myself filling my days with lots of conversations off the record, one-on-one with people and in small groups, because I think, like I started with, some of my story resonates, and sort of almost a jigsaw puzzle pieces coming together for people in their own story. We have different pictures on the front of the box.
Yes.
But we seem to have some pieces in common. And so I'm very happy for people to track me down, Danette, and you can do that at jasontsmith.com.au.
Beautiful.
I do have a little 2-minute video that I post every week, because that's about my attention span.
I love that.
And I just give a leadership lesson. It's called 2-Minute Convictions. So we've just talked about convictions. And I just try and give one simple insight that I've learned over the 25 years, or, I'm 48. So really it's over 48 years of living. And if people want to dial into that, and they can spare a couple of minutes, and then if something really floats their boat, we can talk about it. I'm very happy to do that.
Oh, I love that, because I read it in the book. You're referred to as the kettle. And so I've left this till last, because I reckon our audience will love this. So I'd love to know, what's your favourite joke, Jason?
Oh, that is a terrible question, Danette.
It's the
Because
best.
if this conversation has gone well to this point, it now just devolves into embarrassing nonsense. And if my kids see this, they will deny me.
I won't tell them.
It's hard to pick a favorite joke. That's not a fair question either, because when you love a laugh, there's just too many to choose from. I'll tell you a story really quickly.
Nice.
Because we've been talking a little bit about the business journey. So a CEO gets recruited for a struggling company, and his mandate is to turn this thing around. And as he's walking into the office, the outgoing CEO just hands him 3 envelopes and says, when you get into trouble, rely on these envelopes. It's my best tip. So, he just put them in the top drawer of his desk, got on with the excitement of his first 100 days. Things are going swimmingly well. He's the new guy. Everything's bright and shiny, until, of course, the quarter reports come out and sales are a bit flat, and he's got to give a ASX announcement, and he's like, oh, this is going to be hard. So he pulls out one of these envelopes, and the first tip from the outgoing CEO was, blame your successor. He's like, that's a good one. So he goes to his press conference and he says, look, the outgoing guy left me in a hole. The business was underperforming when I inherited it. We're slowly turning it around, and everybody applauded him. He dodged a bullet. All is well and good, except for, a few more months later, there's a bit of cultural unrest in the organization. There's a bit of disunity. Some people in the team aren't happy with him. He's like, oh, this is hard. This is really hard. So he remembers he's still got 2 envelopes. So he goes and pulls one out of his top drawer. The second tip from the outgoing CEO was, just announce a restructure. It'll solve all your problems. So he goes to his next executive team meeting. He says, we're going to do some things differently. We're going to restructure the organization. We're going to, change our uniforms, adjust our branding. It's a refresh. And everybody's like, oh, this guy's creative and innovative. And he dodged a second bullet. Well, by the end of the year, some wins, some losses, there was some big troubles now brewing in some legal issues. Someone was suing the company. He's feeling like this is going to really be a hard one to maneuver out of. He goes for his last envelope, Danette, and the tip in the third envelope was, it's time to prepare 3 envelopes. Now, that might not be so much funny as it is true.
True.
And that is that we all in leadership can't dodge the problems. Hardships are a reality. I mean, I've just written 600 pages of hardships, right? Like, it's a reality. So you can't blame someone else. You can't just restructure your way out of it with smoke and mirrors. And giving up, writing your own 3 envelopes is not a great strategy either. Like, I think we have to own it. We have to face it. We have to accept hardship is part of the leadership crucible. We become better for it. We need to be honest and authentic about it. We will learn more from it than the successes we otherwise want. And so my jokes aren't that funny, but hopefully there's a message in it.
I love that, Jason. Thank you so much. So I'd love to say thank you so much for joining us today. And would you like to hold your book up again just so our viewers can see Unlikely by Jason T. Smith, 1st of October. Make sure you buy yourself a copy. And I'd like to say to all of our listeners and our viewers, we wish you a magical week. Thank you so much.